And if anything goes wrong with that, you can just use the chat function and type your question, like if your mic isn't working. Cool. So first, a little bit about me. I'm Louie Stowell. I'm an author and publisher in the UK. I work for Penguin Random House, but I've been getting to know Sonali on Twitter. So I feel like in the pandemic, it's kind of my main social life now. So it's great to, I guess, see your face other than just a little icon for the first time. And I was really excited to be asked to host this and to be able to ask lots of searching questions. It's a really exciting book, and I think a very necessary one for our times. So the book is called 21 Fantastic Failures, and what their stories teach us. So Sonali was brought up in Delhi. She got her bachelor's in English from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, worked in book publishing for 4 years, and then got a master's in creative writing from Edinburgh, where you are now, it seems. And you also, so she also co-founded an international literary magazine that promotes underrepresented voices, and is now doing a PhD in publishing studies from the University of Stirling, and working on her first novel, and somehow found time to write this book as well. So a very impressive resume, and I'm really happy to introduce her. And I believe you're going to read a little extract from the book first.
Yes, I thought that'd be a great way to start. So I'm going to read an excerpt today from one of my favorite chapters. It's kind of like choosing one among your babies, though. So one of my favorite chapters, but it is honestly, it was amazing researching and writing this. So yes, hi everyone. I'm Sonali Misra. Thanks, Louie, for giving me that nice introduction. And the chapter I'll be reading from today is the one on Oprah Winfrey. I do have some content and trigger warnings though before I begin. And they're regarding references to sexual abuse, self-harm, suicide, and infant death. I know, really cheery topics, but I can just wave my hands when I reach those bits. There are 3 instances. And if you like, you can mute me then for about 30 seconds. And then, yeah, you can rejoin if you like then, if that's okay. Okay, here it is. Not many people in this world can claim to be recognized by solely their first name, but one such figure is the queen of all media, Oprah. She rose to international fame through her talk show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, which ran for 25 years until its final season in 2011. She's often counted among the world's most dedicated philanthropists and even founded a school for girls in South Africa. While she is best known for her show in which she interviewed over 35,000 people, she has diversified her portfolio to encompass other forms of media, such as film, publishing, radio, and the internet. Proving her acting chops in The Color Purple and Beloved, she went on to showcase her entrepreneurial skills by launching the Oprah Winfrey Network. She should also be known as the Queen of Firsts. She was the first woman to own and produce her own talk show, as well as the first African-American woman to enter Forbes magazine's list of world's richest people and be awarded the Cecil B. DeMille Award. It's really no surprise that she's worth over $2.5 billion today. 66 years old, but showing no signs of slowing down, Oprah is considered one of the most influential people on earth. Whatever she vouches for turns to gold. With such powers must come a story comparable to an epic, replete with its tragedies and surprise twists. Almost everyone she knew bet against her, but they made the mistake of not taking into account her belief that she held the keys to her destiny. Prior to becoming Oprah, she was Oprah Gail Winfrey, a baby born to an unmarried teenage girl in rural Mississippi, United States. Her father was enlisted in the army and away at a base when he received news of the birth. Shortly after Oprah was born, her mother went away as part of the Great Migration, which was the movement of millions of African Americans from the southern states to other parts of the country. Like the countless Black youngsters handed over to their relatives to be raised at that time, baby Oprah was left with her grandmother. The grandmother wasn't well off, living in a house without running water or electricity. She had been educated till the 3rd grade, and both she and Oprah's mother worked as domestic help. So that was the future they envisioned for Oprah as well. Although the mother ran a strict household, Oprah claims the older woman saved her life by teaching her significant skills: to read at an unusually early age and speak eloquently. At age 6, Oprah was sent to Milwaukee to live with her mother, who had birthed another daughter by then. Oprah knew that she would never again see the only family she had known, her grandmother. The mother and two daughters lived in a small one-room apartment. The mother worked long hours, so Oprah was often left in the care of male relatives. A vulnerable child, she was raped at age 9 by a cousin and molested between the ages of 10 and 14 by relatives and a family friend. These horrific instances became so frequent in the young girl's life that she thought them the norm. Shamed and threatened by the perpetrators, she hid these harrowing experiences all the way into her late 20s. But trauma cannot be suppressed for long. It impacted her life and caused behavioral problems. She began acting out and once even ran away from home. Oprah became pregnant at age 14 but hid the fact for 7 months because she feared for her life. Her mother wanted her gone and took Oprah to a detention home. Seeing other disturbed youth around her, Oprah realized that she would officially be labeled a bad girl by society, although she didn't feel like one inside. In a serendipitous turn of events, her mother was informed that the home was full and there wouldn't be a place for the young girl for 2 weeks. Oprah thus got another chance to live with family, and she was sent away to live with her father and stepmother in Nashville, Tennessee. Oprah's father ran a tight ship. He set a curfew for his teenage daughter and told her to read a new book every week and submit a report on it to him. Without a sympathetic ear around, Oprah continued hiding the pregnancy. Lonely and afraid of how society would treat her as an unwed mother, she inflicted harm on herself and contemplated suicide. She eventually gave birth, but the baby died in hospital and she returned to school shortly after. Her father told her that that through these devastating circumstances, she had been given a second chance at life. Oprah vowed to seize it. She began excelling at studies and extracurricular activities, such as plays and speeches, and was elected head of the student council. This turnaround started a chain reaction that attracted her subsequent successes. 16-year-old Oprah was chosen to attend a White House conference, and a local radio station interviewed her about it. Her confidence and command over language created such an impression on the folks at the station that when they needed to nominate a teenager to enter the Miss Fire Prevention contest a year later, they recalled Oprah. She was the lone African American contestant and assumed her chances at winning were nil. As a consequence, she felt freed from the pressures of the competition and was completely herself on stage. In the question answer round, she was asked what career she would like to pursue. She responded with broadcast journalism purely because she wanted to provide a unique answer and had watched the famous journalist Barbara Walters on TV earlier that day. As fate would have it, just as the words escaped her mouth, something clicked, not only within her regarding her career choice, but at the competition too. Oprah won. Later, when she went on to claim her prize from the radio station, they asked her whether she'd like to hear her voice on tape and thus had her read a copy. She blew everyone away and was offered a job on the spot, which she worked at after school every day. Oprah joined Tennessee State University on full scholarship. At 19, she was approached by a reputed local TV news channel for the position of an on-air reporter. She turned it down initially, believing she wouldn't be able to manage full-time employment along with her studies, until one of her professors told her that people went to university hoping they would receive such a call one day. She took his advice to heart and became the youngest and first female news anchor for the channel in Nashville. She was an instant hit. 3 years later, she moved to a higher profile channel in Baltimore, Maryland. Throughout her time on TV, she modeled herself after Barbara Walters, the person she had compared herself to at the pageant. However, Oprah wasn't like other journalists. When reporting on a house fire, she offered blankets to the victims and told parents who had lost their children that they didn't have to speak with her about the incident. She was too passionate, too empathetic, and the bosses noted it. She got told off for this humane trait, for caring too much about people rather than the scoop. Moreover, the management felt that she didn't look the part of a newscaster, that her hair was too thick, her eyes too far apart, her nose too wide. In other words, they criticized her for her racial features. She was sent to a fancy New York City salon for a makeover. More likely, they tried to make her over into someone she wasn't. Their attempt at a perm utterly failed and ruined her hair, making it all fall off. Not willing to keep her on anymore, nor wanting to pay out her contract, the management hit upon what they thought was a creative solution: to demote her to a morning slot. And this is how she came upon a crossroads in her life where she was presented with two choices. She could take path one. She knew she was close to being fired. She might be young, but she was no fool. She'd had a good ride for it the past few years, but who was she kidding? Good things didn't happen to her. Her shot at radio and fame on TV were freaks of fortune. Born into poverty, deprived of a mother's love, repeatedly sent away, physically and sexually abused, impregnated at a young age. That's who Oprah had been. Who was she to fight fate? She should find a sensible job like her relatives and be content with her lot in life. Or she could take path two. One clear distinction remained between the agonizing experiences of her childhood and this conundrum at work: choice. She did not choose to be born into hardship. She did not choose to repeatedly relocate in her childhood, and her choice was stolen from her at every instance of abuse. As an adult now, she could take a stand and entirely own who she was. She had Oprah's face and heart, not that of any other newscaster. So, she would interact with guests on the morning talk show as she deemed fit and connect with other human beings. What's the worst that could happen that wasn't already on the verge of occurring? And that's the path she went with. Oprah's decision to shed the skin of an unbiased journalist, with which she had always felt a disconnect, and be her own person on the morning TV show that she had been demoted to, is the exact reason that every viewer fell in love with her: her authenticity and openness. She honed her skill in the late 1970s and redefined the genre of talk shows. The spontaneous back and forth of actual human interaction, where she was more concerned with listening to others than spewing eloquent phrases, suited her. Her success on what was supposed to be a demotion led to her independent talk show in Chicago, one of the largest markets in the US. Oprah soon became a household name due to her obvious talent and mass appeal, and the show was eventually renamed from AM Chicago to The Oprah Winfrey Show. Other talk shows did prop up, but they were focused on orchestrating confrontations for cheap thrills. While the earlier episodes of Oprah's show were guilty of this practice too, she repurposed the format to make it more uplifting and spiritual. This cost her in the ratings initially, but her audience soon grew to admire her for it. It's also what she ascribes the longevity of her show to. From 6 million homes in the US in 1986, she ultimately reached the screen of over 100 countries. And what can we learn from Oprah's story? Life isn't a smooth ride. Not one among us is born into ideal circumstances or faces zero obstacles. It is true that some encounter much tougher troubles than others, and allowances must be made to let them cope the way they choose. We should try not to despair, as there's always hope, a possibility to prevail. Metal is forged by hammer and anvil, but this external force does not change its elemental nature. While our experiences shape who we become, how much power we grant them depends wholly on us. Many use the terms fate and destiny interchangeably, but they are not the same. We can be resigned to our fates and believe we have no control over what happens to us. Or we could explore possibilities and work towards the potential of our destinies. Yes, life can be random and unfair, and we cannot exert our authority over every single aspect of the universe, but we do have choice. We make thousands of choices every day that many of us are fortunate to have full control over. We operate within the paradigm of our circumstances, but they can be molded by the sheer force of our will too. Life isn't about living through the motions as a passive spectator. After all, we get one shot at this, so we might as well be active participants and carve our own way. We must remember that our destiny is in our own hands, since we are not our circumstances. Thanks. That was the excerpt.
Thank you so much. That was really fascinating. I feel like I didn't actually know a great deal about Oprah beyond, what I'd seen in headlines before. So it was really interesting to hear her backstory.
Yeah, I learned a lot about her through the research as well. Obviously, I think most of us know who Oprah is. We've seen her show. It ran for so many years. But yeah, when I was researching her story, I was shocked to find a lot of these things. And also one bit that I didn't read out in this, but it's in the book as extra trivia, is that because of the experiences that she had as a child, and the trauma that she faced, she used her platform to fight for justice for others who do not have the same opportunities that she does. And she testified before the US Senate Judiciary Committee in 1991 and spoke of her childhood experiences with abuse. Her aim was to support the National Child Protection Act, which asked for the establishment of a national database of convicted child abusers, which we see in movies these days where everyone has that registry they look at in all these spy movies and thriller movies that we see. It was passed in 1993 and it was dubbed the Oprah Bill.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea that she had such a huge role in that as well.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive. I think the bit that really struck me when I was listening was about the way that she sort of moved from other people's expectations of an objective journalist to her own authentic version, which wasn't objective and in the end was what people liked. So that was fascinating. And I think, I'm sure there's lots of really interesting kind of lessons to extrapolate from that.
Yeah, I mean, I have obviously focused on like one lesson per each person, but there are lots of them. Yeah, I agree with you because, like I said, she's the queen of firsts regarding like logistical things, where she was the first African American woman on this, or she was the youngest person to do something, or the first African American woman to win a certain award. But yeah, she broke the stereotype, like you said, of what a journalist is supposed to be, and so she pushed the boundaries regarding what journalism did in her day as well. So that's something else that I really appreciate about her.
Yeah, fascinating. So I have loads of questions. So
Let's
I'll get so the first off, I'd just like to know how the book came about. You know, what drew you to the topic and what was your kind of process to publishing?
So interestingly, this book was actually commissioned by Rupa Publications, which is the publisher. Here's the book, by the way. And is one of the leading publishers in India. And so they had already come up with the topic. That's what, like, for the others, what commissioning means. And they had like a list of a few people in the book that are already there. And they just gave me the topic, basically like a brief summary, and they said, with it. And I was a bit scared and nervous because I hadn't really attempted nonfiction before this, which I told them as well. But they said, just give it a shot. We've gone through a few writers already, didn't really like how they approached it. So why don't you try? I'm like, okay. I was actually vacationing on the Isle of Bute with my mum in those days. This was right after I had submitted my creative writing master's dissertation. So I chose Steve Jobs, which I thought was a really safe choice because everyone's really intrigued about his life. There are so many documentaries and books, interviews featuring him. And because I like to do a little weird, like I like to do some weird things. So I converted it almost into like a fable format, which is what I say in the introduction as well. These are kind of like fables for adults because they're based on life people. So like you might have seen in the structure of this, I present with just their biography in a chronological order. Then I make them reach a crossroads where path one is always imaginary. It's something I think if I or someone else was in their place might have done. And then path two is the extraordinary step they made in that moment in their lives. And what was the fallout from that decision? And then what's the lasting lesson or the moral of the story? And then some extra trivia at the end. So I send them with the structure, which they must have really liked because they had a meeting and they came back to me and said that they enjoyed my sample and they'd like to offer me a book deal, which was amazing because I think I hadn't even received my degree at that point. So it was great to like graduate with the book deal in hand. So that's how the book actually came out to be. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And would you say, in terms of classifying the book, would you say it's biography, self-help, or some sort of somewhere between the two?
Yeah, it's hard when people ask me, or like when I'm bombarding all my friends with messages being, hey, my book's out, here's the link. I obviously want to tell them a little bit about it. So I do classify it as biography and self-help, even though self-help has kind of this almost derogatory connotations to it. And it's a weird mix of those things. I think I was having this conversation with a friend the other day where he said, yeah, people might look down upon the genre of what self-help is. But the reason we read all these biographies of famous people is because they are written in kind of like an aspirational format. We're reading them, yes, to learn more about history because we're curious about that, but also because we think that maybe we can also do something similar. If this person can rise
Yeah.
from these circumstances, maybe we can as well.
So in a way, biography is a subgenre of self-help.
A lot of them are, I think so. Like especially like the business biographies that you have these days. I think a lot of them are self-help as well. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not just like pure reference history books, I guess.
Yeah. And I feel like kind of historically, the philosophy's had the function of self-help, you know, that you kind of basically books on how to live. And I feel like perhaps the self-help label sort of has connotations of being less authentic, but actually you are kind of delving into how to live in this book and what it means to live and what it means to fail and to succeed.
Yeah, I had a little bit of, I mean, I have like an imposter syndrome regarding everything, whether it's generally writing or writing this book or even doing my PhD. And I remember sitting with my parents one day saying, why would anyone buy this book? I'm no one. Like, I haven't achieved something great in my life. Why would anyone listen to what I'm saying? And then they realized that the focus of the book is not actually about who I am versus what I'm talking about, which is why, again, in my introduction, I make clear, and through the book, I make clear that I'm not speaking to the readers from like a higher moral stance. I'm not saying you should do this and you should do that and you do this. I always use us, because genuinely, while I was researching and writing this book, I learned a lot myself. And these days, I actually very actively try to imbibe these lessons every day too. And I think circumstances are so tough right now that they actually do help me these days. Like every day, I think of like one lesson which I can actually actively apply to any problem I'm facing that day. Yeah.
Is there any particular of the lessons that really stick in your mind that's, you know, that you've used recently? Or
it honestly changes every day. Like I said, it's kind of like choosing among my babies. I appeared on a podcast last week, and the answer she asked me a similar question, and the answer I gave then was different. The one I'm thinking about today, especially because we're talking purely about this book, is Steven Spielberg's chapter and his lesson, which says more than one route leads to triumph. When he tried to apply to film school, he actually didn't get into film school. I'm pretty sure that film school like really regrets it now.
Yeah.
And other than that, he learned through just purely working, and specifically a focus on a moment when he was making the movie Jaws, which is what shot him to fame. And he had spent a lot of money on these robot sharks, which were the villains of the movie Jaws. But when it came down to it, they didn't work.
Right.
And everyone, like, I don't know, there was a scene which I read about, which really, I was just visualizing, it's great, where the crowds had gathered. He was actually shooting at sea. Crowds had gathered on the beach. He was supposed to press a button, and the shark was supposed to shoot out mouth first. And something weird happened and actually sort of shot out like tail first. And he was already over budget. He was already like behind his schedule, and he was receiving lots of threatening letters and like notices from his company. So he decided to change his tactic. And instead of focusing very visually on the shark, he used the fear of the unknown, which is when music and that tone, that the tune that everyone knows, da 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 da, everyone knows that music and can associate it with Jaws. He uses music. He uses like barrels to create waves in the ocean. And that fear of the unknown actually plays a lot more in your mind than seeing a robot shark would have, especially considering how visual effects have moved over the years. If we look at it now and we saw a robot shark, we would have laughed at it. But because it actually uses fear of the unknown, it's still like a relevant movie, I guess, in terms of its visual effects even today. And regarding this book, I had never thought that my first book would be nonfiction. I had never thought I would actually write nonfiction. But I think you should make use of whatever opportunities land in your lap. And this one did. And I think I would have been a fool to turn around to this really reputed publishing house and say, no, I don't write nonfiction, so I'm not going to write this book. Find someone else. So yeah, that's something that I'm thinking about these days, that sure, my first book wasn't the novel that I've been working on for a few years, but it's something I'm actually really proud of. And this book will always be special because it's what got my name out.
Absolutely. I mean, I started in nonfiction, so I definitely relate.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so cool. And now you're children's book.
Yeah, children's nonfiction. But I mean, the research process is probably the same. It's just a matter of like you have to write quite a long list of things you're not allowed to include because they're too dark. Or odd things like kind of marketing reasons for not including things like it won't go down in such and such a territory, you know.
Yeah.
I remember having to edit out an anecdote about Ronald Reagan because the US wouldn't like it.
Yeah, that was something I was nervous about as well, because I'm like, a lot of these people are really powerful. I don't know if they will read this. I don't think they'll read this book. If they do, if their lawyers do, I have to be careful in my language, because obviously none of them are perfect. Some of them might have actually been involved in like some sketchy behavior as well. But again, the point of this book isn't to idolize or idealize any of these. And I'm not here like dissecting the characters. I'm just going to focus on the matter that is relevant to us and relevant to this book and relevant to the lesson.
And as you say, the kind of use of them as a fable. So you're kind of mythologizing them, not kind of doing a detailed biography.
Yeah.
In terms of exploring the notion of failure, what are your thoughts on what failure means to you as you've kind of gone through this research process and seen these other people's lives and their failures? And I guess, what does failure mean to you? But also, is it a necessary part of success in your view?
This question, I think everyone categorizes failure really differently because everyone's priorities in life are different. And it's something I talk about in the Van Gogh chapter, where broadly, I think people pursue a career for three reasons. One is for power, whether that's reputation, money, fame. The other is because they want to help their fellow human beings. They want to do something for the community. And the third is because it gives them joy. And I think people are very fortunate if they can do all three within their jobs. I don't think it's totally possible to actually do all three, but I'm sure there are some people who can do all three. But depends on your priorities, why you're pursuing a career, why you're doing a certain task even, and then what you categorize as failure. So even the kind of failures represented within this book are different. So a lot of them are what society might deem clearly as a failure, which is, for example, like Steve Jobs, where his company was stolen from him. And then had to kind of start from scratch, not really, but kind of start from scratch and then build himself up again. But then there are also people like Vincent Van Gogh and Lady Gaga that I talk about. Vincent Van Gogh, he's one of the most celebrated painters today. And he's not a failure, obviously, because he had some mental health issues, which unfortunately he couldn't receive the proper care for it in his time and day. He's not a failure because he was driven to the point of taking his own life. That's not what his failure is about. But I'm pretty sure, or at least but I think that in his own life, he might have perceived of himself as a failure because he only sold sources aren't like super clear about this, but I think he only sold 1 or 2 paintings in his own lifetime. Which is,
my knowledge of Van Gogh comes entirely from an episode of Doctor Who, so you can either
that episode sticks to me as well. It's so sad and unfortunate that he died thinking that no one appreciated his art or that no one would pay for his art. And then I'll try to extrapolate a lesson from that. And the other one is Lady Gaga, which also is really relevant to me these days, her lesson, especially during the pandemic and the lockdown. Her lesson is to be kind to yourself. She's a perfectionist. She loves having control over every facet of her career. And she drives herself to the limits. And she injured herself and she kept performing through it for months on stage until one day she couldn't walk, and she finally told someone that she was in pain, and the doctor told her that if you had performed even once more, you would have needed a hip replacement even before she was age 30. And she was forced to then take a sabbatical and kind of figure out her priorities and then show herself some kindness and show her body and her mind some kindness. But apart from this way of failing her own body, society had failed her, where she was also a victim of abuse from the entertainment industry. And when she tried speaking up about it with some powerful people in the industry, they didn't help out. They didn't respond the way she thought they would. And in that way, society had failed her as well. So I think failure depends on everyone's definition of what's important to them, the kind of goals they set, and whether they're able to meet it or not. So I think it's really subjective. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the this is one I'm springing on you that I haven't mentioned before. In the Oprah Winfrey chapter, you talk about both fate and destiny, and I was wondering if you could speak to that a bit about how those two ideas sit with failure and success.
Again, I think it's just a way of like perceiving things. Obviously, people who are completely atheist, or who say that this whole thing's a sham and the system set up against you won't buy into what fate and destiny mean. I like to personally believe, not that I'm very religious, but I like to personally believe that things do work out in the time they should. At least they have in my case, so I can at least speak in my case. And I think people do use the words fate and destiny interchangeably, but I've looked this up and I've had discussions about this. They're actually not the same thing. Fate is that you believe that things aren't in your control and everything is like written somewhere in some stone tablet, I don't know, and you are doomed to repeat, or you're doomed to like do certain actions. But in that concept, choice is taken away from you. And yes, there are certain things that are stacked up against us. And yes, we do not obviously have control over every single facet in life. But I think even like the small choices that we make every day, like I may suffer from body, like self-esteem issues, like body image issues. I do have a choice in then what my meal is going to be. I'm fortunate enough to be able to spend money on, lots of ingredients. So then if it's my choice, if I'm actually going and buying like fast food, or if I'm making the effort of like cooking, and just like these small choices every day, we are able to exert control over them. Yeah.
The way that you were expressing destiny in the chapter, it did feel a bit more like destiny is sort of somewhere you get to eventually, but there's many paths to it, whereas fate is more, there's just one path, so the destiny, the way you were kind of expressing it, does feel like a much more flexible concept somehow, perhaps more useful.
Yeah, I think with destiny, you are able to be a bit more active. Sorry, I'm just like fine. I can hear that there was like someone's mic was on, so I was just. I've done that now. Yes. Yeah, I think destiny, and I like the concept of destiny more, maybe just because personally it works more for me. That it does allow you to exert more control. It allows you to be a bit more active. At least personally, I don't want to just like sit back and watch my life fly back. Thinking, oh yeah, it doesn't matter what I do today. It doesn't matter what I do a week from now. It's all stacked up against me. That leads to kind of like absurdism and existentialism, which I'm better off not engaging with that. Yeah, so for destiny, for me, we get like one shot at life, unless you believe in reincarnation. We get like one shot at life. I think it's better to at least exert your choice and exert your will and control over the things that you do have control over.
Yeah. And so the next thing I wanted to know was, obviously nonfiction was something you'd never done before. So what would you say was the most challenging part of that process of doing something new?
It was, I will be honest, it was the research. So like I said that I did this book, I got this book deal, I think a month after submitting my dissertation. And while I do need structure and I need deadlines to like make myself sit down and work, which is part of the reason also why I did the creative writing masters. I had to write a 20,000 word dissertation for the final submission for my master's. And to be honest, I wrote it in like 3 weeks. And I'm usually pretty happy with my first drafts. I mean, now I'll go back and change it, but at that moment, I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, okay, my dissertation was 20,000 words, and this book is supposed to be about like 45 to 50,000. So sure, taking some more time, I'll be able to do it within, let's say, 3 months. I was so wrong. So wrong. I will, if for example, I spent 100 days writing this book, I didn't, I spent a lot more. If for example, like this book took 100 days, I will say 90 of those days was actually spent on research. And for every chapter, which is around an average of like 2000 or 2500 words, I had Word documents of like 20 to 40,000 words of research. So like whittling that down to my chapter and then ensuring that the research I was reading, because I have this tendency of writing in the voice that I'm reading, which was great when I was writing my exams for my undergrad in English Lit, because I sounded so smart because I was imbibing that language from the critics. I had to make sure that I stayed true to my tone and my voice. So that aspect was honestly the toughest for the book.
Yeah, I can imagine that actually. And was it hard to like you've done all that research and you can't put it all in the book? Was it hard to like leave that in your other Word document and lose it in a way?
I will say this though, that I have somehow put in majority of the relevant things in there. I can't think of like any specific incident which I'm sad that I had to leave.
Okay, that's good.
So, which honestly, I will say, if I can like pat myself on the shoulder myself, just somehow like I am proud of the fact that I have somehow fit in all of this information, and not in a way that's going to tire anyone or exhaust anyone within 8 or 9 pages.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that I am really proud of this book. So
yeah,
honestly, those like little gray boxes at the end with like extra trivia really helped out, because there were some things that I found really interesting, and then I found and they weren't really relevant to the lesson. But I could just be like, hey, did you know this happened? Like one of my favorite ones is actually from the Steve Jobs chapter, which is like if I can just like read it out, it's just like an extra box at the end. It's called Steve and Sean. In 1984, Steve Jobs was invited along by a journalist friend to attend the 9th birthday party of Sean Lennon, the son of John Lennon of the Beatles. Jobs brought a present for the young boy, a Macintosh computer. Jobs placed it on the floor, put on Mac Paint, and showed Sean how to use the mouse, and Sean quickly began drawing. You have to remember, this was the first ever mouse in a personal computer. Among the merrymakers was the acclaimed artist Andy Warhol. He sat between Steve and Sean Lennon and lifted the mouse off the ground to move it. Jobs guided him on how to use it properly, and soon a big smile spread across Warhol's face as he turned to the other guests and announced that he had drawn a circle. This was like one of the best stories I've ever read about someone, and I love when different people's words collide.
Yeah, it's so unexpected.
That
pushing together.
Yeah, Steve Jobs, John Lennon's son, and Andy Warhol in a room. Like it sounds like the start of a joke.
Yes.
Yeah, so I love that I had these little boxes at the end that I could put all this information in.
Yeah, that's great. And do you have a favorite chapter?
No, like I said, like it changes every day. So
okay, what's today your favorite chapter?
Yeah, so right now I think it is the Steven Spielberg one that I mentioned, because that's the lesson that I'm relating to right now, especially during this launch. Yeah.
Well, actually, we haven't had any kind of robot sharks go wrong yet, so we're fairly smooth on the tech front. And so you mentioned your creative writing degree. How significant did you find doing that degree as part of writing this book and part of your development as a writer? And is it something you think is a necessary step for writers?
I don't think it's a necessary step. I realize it's a huge privilege to study that degree. And honestly, coming from my community and my background, when I told people that I was going to the UK to study creative writing, first of all, I have to always repeat, because they think they've misheard me. They're like, it can't be writing, it has to be something else. So I have to repeat it. And then they just look at me and I'm like, yeah, I'm actually going to learn how to write stories and a novel. And they're shocked that that's a degree. And because again, I come from a community where you're supposed to do engineering or medical or law or business. And my parents are here, and I couldn't be more grateful to them that they believed in my skills or like my potential to be a good writer, and they put in all of that investment in me. And just like yeah, okay, go enjoy, have fun. And I realize it's a huge privilege to study that degree. It personally did help me. I don't think everyone requires it. I personally needed structure and deadlines, and a lot of it's not, and also like writing is such a subjective thing. There aren't any really how to's manuals for it, because you can write whatever you want, like who's telling you what really the structure is, or what even grammar is. At the end of the day, you can play around with grammar as well. These rules are, they're not rules, they're like guidelines, and they're super
Yeah.
flexible. But personally for me it helped, and I think, like I said, for me somehow things do work out in the time they should, I believe. Because I actually had applied for this degree right out of my undergrad in 2013, and this school rejected me. And it was my professors who had rejected my application. And but I get it. This as part of my application, I had to send in a submission of 5,000 words, and what I sent then actually wasn't good.
Right.
And writing is something I worked at for a few years. So I then went into publishing for 4 years, and I still did practice writing a bit on the side. But I did learn a lot more about the book world. So that I did finally apply for this degree again, and then I got in. I had a lot more to contribute from the other side of things within the classroom, because a lot of people don't have that publishing knowledge. It can like always be shrouded in like this mystique. So that's like a different thing that I brought to it. And then I could do some projects, like I edited an art class anthology. And again, because I had that editorial experience, I had that publishing experience, it's something that I could do. So things do work out like in the time they should. And for me, it has. But again, I wouldn't say that it's a necessary step for everyone.
That sounds interesting. I think that idea of like the structure and discipline is something that not everyone needs, but some people do need. And I mean, did you find having the kind of other people on the course was helpful, like people in the same boat as you?
Yeah, because this was the first time that I was put in a classroom with people from so many different backgrounds. And again, creative writing isn't like a professional degree in the sense that you can only do it after a certain doing other degrees. So we had people who were studying, I think, who had like studied like science, medical, who had done business. Some people had done like journalism and English, but they had also like the age range was amazing. I had people who were 21, and then there were people who were in their 40s and 50s as well within the same class, because it is a degree that's more of like a personal development versus like, oh, this is going to assure me of a certain job as soon as I graduate. So interacting with them, reading their pieces, getting their feedback, because I think the most important thing that you should seek when you are writing something is feedback from people whose opinions you trust. Not everyone, people will have their own opinions, but like some people whose opinions and whose taste and whose faith, I think you can trust that whatever they're saying is in good faith, because some people might just say something for the heck of saying something. So that was honestly the most important bit of the whole course.
Oh no, that's great. So I'm nosy and I want to know, what are you working on now?
I'm so greedy. I love doing everything. I want everything, and I love doing everything. And I push this is again why the whole Lady Gaga chapter is so important for me, because I tend to push myself to the limit. And then I do break at some point. I'll be like crying, like, no, I can't do all of this together. So currently, obviously, along with my PhD, which is my primary focus right now. Here, I'm not just saying it because our supervisor's here. It's honestly my primary focus. Along with that, yeah, but I do love doing my side projects as well. So I have actually recently I sent a book pitch to a publisher over here, which is nonfiction again, which I didn't think would happen. But I'll find out if something will happen regards that or not. But apart from that, I do have that novel, which poor thing has been on hold for like 2 years since I've been working on this book, and then moved here and was focusing on the PhD. And I actually had taken 3 weeks off in September after my final submission thing for the first year PhD, saying, yeah, I'm going to sit down and work on my novel now. But then the book came out and I had to work on the promotion and just like daily admin stuff. So yes, And I do work on like short stories now and again, but the novel that I'm writing on is, it's like the book that I want to put out.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely excited about it. I'm halfway through the first draft and I know how the story ends. I know what happens. I just need to get it on paper.
Yeah.
I classify it, again, if I have to like put tags on it, I would classify it as political adventure fantasy.
Sounds amazing.
So it's set in India, and it's through like the fantasy genre I interpret some of the socio-political issues within India and also the world right now. And I do it through the medium of like a really fun adventure story with lots of just like bloodshed and action scenes and like lots of sassy jokes and dogs. so, so like dogs, and I have actually included my own dog as a character within the book, which I love that as an author you can do something like that. So yeah, that's my dog on screen over there.
Oh, hello.
He's in my novel, and he's also my dog is actually the last person I talk about.
I need to take a screen grab of this dog, sorry.
Yeah, so my dog is actually the last person, whatever I write about in the book as well, because it's in the acknowledgements.
Oh, what's your dog called?
He's Rico, yeah.
Rico. Well, that sounds really exciting. I can't wait for you to finish it so I can read it. And in terms of the fantasy elements of it, what kind of fantasy are we talking? Are we talking like elves, superpowers?
No, it's more about like abilities and superpowers. So there aren't any fantastical creatures.
Superpowers is great.
Like they are, but not really.
Yeah.
Is all I'm gonna say. But it is more focused on like superpowers and abilities.
Yeah. Because I read a really great Indian superpower novel recently. It's from a while ago, Turbulence, by Samit Basu.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but like Samit Basu's was really good. Yeah,
really, really good. It's quite funny, which I always like as a kind of very going thing. So I have one last question before we open to the floor. So I just noticed in the chat, one of the questions is, who's a good boy? My question is for everyone who hasn't got the book yet, where can they buy it? Whether they're in India or the UK, what's the best way to?
So this is what the book is. I've also like painted my nails to just completely complement the book. I thought it would be like a nice shot. I don't know if you're seeing the mirror image though, because I can see the mirror image here, but yeah. So 21 fantastic failures and what their stories teach us. So the paperback is available currently in India on Amazon, Flipkart, and your local bookshops. But it's also fortunately available internationally as an ebook. So whether it's Amazon.com, Amazon.ca for Canada, Amazon.co.uk, you can get the ebook there, and it should also be available soon through Amazon Print on Demand, so you can like get the paperback soon as well. I think that should be in another month or two.
Great.
Yes, I will, because I'm just gonna do it right now because it's a virtual form and I can actually do this. I'm gonna just put the link, the Amazon link over here in the chat if anyone's interested. Yeah. And if you do buy it, I hope you enjoy it, obviously, but also it would be amazing if you can leave a review on whatever website you buy it on, and as well as Goodreads. That really, really helps. Again, coming from the publishing point of view, it really does help. So if you could do that, that would be amazing.
Amazon reviews just have a massive effect on whether people buy it or not. So having a lot of reviews is really useful. Obviously, having 5-star reviews is great too, but the kind of sheer quantity of reviews matters. So
yeah. Luckily,
that's the best thing you can do for an author.
Sorry?
Apart from buying their book,
yes,
Amazon reviews is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, I have received a few reviews already, which I'm really excited about. Like I go check every day. I'm kind of obsessing with like, ooh, do I have another review today? And they've all been like mostly like 5 stars, like 1 4-star. In my head, I was like, who was this person who gave me a 4-star? I'm like, no, Sonali, it's a good review.
I think people don't understand that 4-star is a diss for an author.
But also it's just like 1 which is 4-star, the rest are all 5 stars. So I'm like, who is this person who gave me 4 stars?
Right, okay, let's have some questions going. So if people use the raise hand function, if you go into there's a bit that says participants at the bottom. If you click on that, there's a tab that says raise hand, and that allows you to raise your hand so Sonali can see that you're asking a question. and can pick you.
Or if your camera's on, you can try waving as well, and you might see you.
Basically, there's 2 screens, so not everyone will be seen, but yeah. So
yes, Des, you have a question. Yes, I'll just unmute you. I've unmuted you. Could you unmute yourself, Des? Sorry.
I think, did it work?
Yes, it does. We can hear you.
Oh,
Hi.
first of all, congratulations to you, Sonali. This is exciting.
Thank you so much.
I'm visiting you from Canada right now.
Oh, wow.
And,
what time is it there?
it's just coming on to 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God. Wow, that is, I appreciate this.
You're well worth it, my dear. You're well worth it. So this, I'm really excited to kind of learn more about the different icons that you feature.
Mhm.
But specifically, when you were talking about Oprah, you mentioned that her mother kind of instilled reading and speaking in an eloquent way as a young child. And I'm wondering whether or not you found any kind of trait that was introduced to the other icons at a young age as well. Like kind of a hint of what was to come.
Yeah. That was her grandmother also, I believe.
Oh, her grandmother?
Correctly. Yeah, the ones I'm thinking of again are actually Steve Jobs, which I found that really interesting. Is that he used to, when as a kid, he used to watch his father tinker in the garage. His father loved building things. And so he used to watch his father actually build things with his hands. And also his father used to obsess over how things looked and how they presented, which is such a huge part of what Apple is and what Apple's identity is. I think the phones are good now. When they started, sure, they were revolutionary in some ways, but in a lot more ways, you could get better phones. I think the best part about Apple used to be its design. It still is, like their very sleek technology. And that's something that he picked up from his dad. And also another thing I found really interesting was that he dropped out of college, but when he went to it, it was kind of like this, he was like a hippie phase, and he just took up calligraphy just cause. And that particular course at university helped him create fonts, which we use even today. He used that course, he used the knowledge from it to create fonts because we didn't obviously have like MS Word or whatever in those days. So that's another thing that I found really interesting. It really does. It's amazing how these things that you pick up as kids, that you are fortunate to pick up in some ways, come to affect your life later on and the kind of decisions or ideas you have then. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you for that.
Thanks for the question. And Kalyani, hi, you have a question. If you could unmute yourself.
Just give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm putting my phone on charge last second and it's just, sorry. Hi, so my question is, out of all the people that you did research, who did you have the hardest time, finding the accurate, correct information on, considering the amount of misinformation on the net and conflicting point of views? Was there one person that you found something that was challenging to find accurate or enough information on?
I think the person actually would be Vincent Van Gogh, because a lot of the people who are spoken about in the book, a lot of them are living, but if they have passed, it was a bit more recently, whereas his was earlier on. So, and again, like I said, he wasn't really famous in his own day, so there wasn't a lot of news coverage that was done of him within different media forms. So it was a bit hard to find accurate information. I did find some sources which are reliable, but in all of my research, I actually liked going to lots of different sources and seeing different points of view, and then finding out what the right one probably was. Again, I could be mistaken, but this is whatever is represented in the book is what is popularly believed to be correct and as factually correct. But I think Vincent Van Gogh is the toughest one. And also his story, because it's such a hard one. It always makes me sad. It was also hard to write and portray it in a sensitive manner, because again, like I mentioned, at no point do I mean to say that he was a failure because he had mental health issues. That's not what the case is. Nor was he a failure because he was driven to take his own life. He perceived himself as a failure, because he did not get the recognition in his own lifetime. And but the part that I love about his story is that that didn't stop him from painting. Even when he was institutionalized, he was literally, again, mental health institutions then are not what we know them to be now. He didn't have like a counselor or a therapist. He was put in like a madhouse and sometimes he would like harm himself. He would try to eat oil paints. So he would put behind like in rooms that had like bars on the windows. And some of the best paintings he's done, he's actually were views that he could see from that window. So when he was let out of his room, he went and painted what he saw. And some of the people also say that the reason we have paintings like Starry Night is because he was actually losing his vision at that point. And that is actually how he perceived his reality. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
there are lots of theories as well about him. And it was a bit hard to write about him, but also like research, obviously. Yeah.
I think you've done a great job of, treading the balance between being informative and sensitive and, really creating such an interesting profile. It was, I think, one of my favorite profiles to read for sure.
Oh, thanks so much. We have another question from Matthew.
Hello, Sonali. Good morning.
Hi, morning.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Out of when you're picking people to write about in the book, were there stories or people that just weren't as interesting to write about?
I wouldn't say interesting. The research was really the research bit was actually pretty interesting because, like I said, the publisher already had a few names in mind which are a bit more obvious. But out of the 21, they had like, I want to say like 7 or 8 names, and even all of those 7, 8 haven't actually gone in the question in the book at the end. I did find, so at the beginning, I had to first look for failures. And then I found like a list of celebrities or icons that we would categorize as failures in different ways. But a lot of them I actually found weren't failures as such. They had like some hardships and hurdles they had to cross, but I wouldn't categorize them as failures. Like, for example, when people talk about like Lionel Messi, they say that his failure is that he had a physical condition which, if wasn't treated, he would have not like his body wouldn't have like developed as it should have usually. But I don't think that's failure. I think that's just like a hurdle he had to cross through, and that's not the thing that I focus on in the book. It's more about his team management skills and how he approaches sport. But there were like a few people, I can't remember the names now, where I found that the lesson that they had was similar to something else already featured in the book. So after I had these like 21 names, I then also had to fix on the lessons. And then I found like a lot of the people had similar lessons. So then I had to like switch one out and find someone else who could offer a different lesson. So that was a tough bit. Yeah.
I see. Cool. All right.
Thanks. Andrew has a question.
Can you hear me? It's me, Poppy, my name Jerry, so it's working.
There's some background noise, but I think I can hear you, yeah.
That's either Dr. Goodman Scramble or my fan from my laptop today.
Sorry, could you type the question maybe? Because I can't properly hear you, sorry. In the meantime, I think I saw something. Meenakshi M. Singh has a question. Would you like to speak it? Would you like to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Hi, Sonali. First of all, congratulations, because I think with the title of the book, the subject of the book is very intriguing, as I believe vulnerability connects one human to another. So that's very interesting subject, and I already feel very drawn to reading the book. My question is that in a self-help book, one feels there is a tendency for the voice to be preachy. So how do you work on your voice sounding non-preachy, that it sounds very genuine and it flows like the lessons come inherently? Yeah. So how do you, what are your thoughts on that, if you could share?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, that was actually a huge bit that concerned me writing this book. Like I had mentioned, I had a conversation with my family when I was having this imposter syndrome issue with the book, where I was saying, who am I really? No one knows who Sonali Misra is. I haven't really achieved anything great in my life. Why should people listen to me? I haven't like failed fantastically and risen from the ashes like a phoenix. And then I could say, you should do this as well, because I've been through this. Like I can't do that. So there's this thing they teach you in all creative writing, or like whenever you're learning writing, you hear this mantra which says, show, don't tell. So that was a huge part of the writing process as well, where I'm trying to show you, so which is why I pick on the biography and I show you this is where this person comes from, this is their context, this is how their life has gone on, this is the moment they've reached where they've come across these crossroads, and they have to choose path one or path two. So I'm showing through their actions what is actually going on. And I think if I hadn't even included the lasting lessons bit, I think if I had left the chapter even at that point, the quality that they're displaying then would have still been clear through their actions and through the narrative. But I still wanted to have it kind of like a fable format and also apply that quality into how we can use it in our day-to-day lives, which is why I have the lasting lessons bit, which I guess honestly, that small paragraph at the end of each chapter is the only self-help section I would say in the book. Otherwise, it's like biography and interesting trivia mostly. And again, I just made sure that I did not sound preachy, because I completely understand where you're coming from. I didn't want to speak from some soapbox. I didn't want to speak from like a higher morals plane, which is why I use us and we while talking about lessons. And I say, we can do this and we can apply this in our lives. Because again, honestly, I was learning these things as I was writing and researching as well. I didn't know these storyful lessons that I could apply in my own life. This is something I learned while reading and analyzing their stories. So that's a way, I hope it's come across the way I mean it, is I try to assure the readers that I am not preaching at you. This is not my story. These are not my lessons. These are not my pearls of wisdom. These are things that we can adapt from these people who have failed fantastically.
Right.
Yeah.
Get it. Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have other questions? Andrew, have you been able to type your question? I thought I saw another one somewhere.
Is Andrew typing?
Yeah. Oh, Manik has a question. Yes.
Yeah, so speaking of all these multiple fantastic failures, right, of these famous personalities, is there a fantastic failure that you have experienced personally that you would want to share, like which has helped you come so far?
Like in my own life, or anyone that I've seen personally around in my circle, do you mean?
And anything that others, I hope, can learn from, like anything that you want to share.
I think honestly, we do have fantastic failures in our own lives as well. They wouldn't be as famous as the people in this book, but I think we do know of people we may have like failed and learned from those lessons too. I'm not just saying this because my parents are on this call, but I think of my parents when I say this. I know the hardships they've been through in their life. My mom is one of the most well-educated and most qualified people I know. She has like 4 or 5 degrees. I think now that when I'm doing my PhD, I might trump her a little, but she has like a master's and an MPhil and an MBA. And for XYZ reasons, she chose to mostly be she has worked. She actually worked in publishing when I was growing up, which is how I had books surrounding me. It's also how I kind of taught myself how to read. So that I'm really grateful for, but she chose to stay at home and focus on her family and raise her kids. And yeah, I wouldn't be the person who I am today if it weren't for her, if it wasn't for my dad, who's been amazing as well. He has done some really cool things in his career. He introduced credit cards in India, which I can just talk around saying, yeah, my dad is the one who brought credit cards in India. And yeah, he's had like failures in his career as well, which everyone does. And then the kind of qualities they both showed then is very inspiring to me. Yeah, thank you.
So Andrew's typed his question.
Oh, sorry. Whose achievement, fantastic failure are you personally most in awe of, and why? Out of the book, it's really hard to choose, to be honest. That way. Let me see again the book.
I mean, who would you say has gone from the almost like the biggest jump from their failure to their success?
One of the people that I think of the most as well is actually this Indian actor, Amitabh Bachchan. And it's amazing because he is now one of the most celebrated and famous actors in the world. Like his statues, his wax statues are in Madame Tussauds, and he's won almost every award you can think of. But what I found really fascinating is, and he's also very known for his tone. He has this amazing baritone, his voice. What I find really amazing as well is that he was a struggling actor where he literally couldn't afford to rent an apartment. He used to sleep on benches in Bombay when he couldn't find any acting job. And he's extremely tall. He's extremely tall in Indian standards. He's like 6 foot plus. But whenever he used to step into doors of film producers, they would turn him away at the door saying, no, you're too tall, you're too thin, get out. Like you won't make it. And his tone, which now people would pay lots and lots and lots of money for him to be the voice of their brand. He tried auditioning for FM to be a radio DJ, an RJ, sorry, and they rejected him because they didn't like his voice at that point. And now people mimic him. Like that's a go-to thing that Indian stand-up comics do. They mimic his voice because it's so recognizable. So that's one of the biggest jumps I've seen as well in terms of rising from your failure. Yeah. Ooh, I think.
So I'm muted. I'm just saying it's very impressive that someone's literally telling you to your face that the thing that makes you you is bad, and that you just keep going anyway. I think that's
yeah. And again, with Oprah's chapter, that struck me a lot, where not only did they tell her, oh, you're too empathetic and this and that, they actually criticized her for her racial features, which is something like obviously people have to contend with. It's horrible, but it's, yeah, that's also something you can't change, and obviously comes from like a very hideous place and hideous frame of mind too. So just contending with all of those issues, apart from your own personal failures, having to contend with how people perceive your ethnicity is annoying. One shouldn't have to, really. I think that's it with the questions. Also, we're a bit over time, but if anyone has any more questions, you can find me on Twitter at Misra Sonali, and I'm on Instagram at sonali.writes. And my website is sonalimisra.com. So just email me, tweet me, Insta post at me, I guess. I don't know. And just if you have any other questions, if you want to discuss anything.
Thank you so much for sort of sharing part of your book and your thinking behind it. It's been so interesting, and I feel like anyone who hasn't read the book yet is definitely going to want to go and get it now. So thank you very much. It's been a lovely way to start spending a Sunday morning, or very early Sunday morning for some people.
Yeah, in Canada.
The afternoon for others, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming here. And yes, been lovely engaging with everyone. And thank you for being here to celebrate my first book launch. That's been great. And thank you so much, Louie, for doing this on a Sunday as well.
If people want to unmute to clap, they're very welcome to.
I mean, I won't say no. Thanks, everyone.
Some people are actually clapping with their like jazz hands into the. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming as well.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Enjoy your Sunday.